Hello and welcome to the Classical Next podcast, the global platform for the ideas and the people redefining classical and art music worldwide. I'm your host, David Taylor. Today, I'm talking with international concert pianist and entrepreneur Alexandra Dariescu. Alexandra is one of the most visionary and dynamic musicians in our industry today. Passionate about championing gender equality, her unique approach to programming with orchestras has seen her concert season over the last few years include around 50% works by women, and has been a solution-focused voice in the industry on how to include works by underrepresented composers. Alexandra has also redefined what it is to be a soloist in the modern world today, with an entrepreneurial approach that, amongst other things, has seen her create the groundbreaking multimedia performance The Nutcracker and I, with over 100 performances across the world. In this conversation, we dive into why a more inclusive approach to programming is important. We look at some of the barriers that prevent change and how we can bring others on board with that journey. We also explore how the role of a soloist has changed, the importance of entrepreneurship, what makes a good album, and how to prepare music students for tomorrow. Despite knowing Alexandra for a few years, I actually learned a lot during this conversation. She always has so much energy, joy, and passion, so I know you will love it. That's enough from me. Let's jump in. Hi, Alex. It's great to see you. Thank you so much for being on the podcast.
Hi, David. So lovely to be here. Thank you for having me.
Pleasure. Well, we've known each other for a long time, so we're going to have to do our best not to giggle all the way through this. But to get started, I wanted to talk about your approach to programming, as it's something very special and something that's achieving great things. So can you tell me about your approach and some of the things it has achieved?
Yeah, well, my approach is a very simple one. I try to mirror the society we live in. So I include, um, of course, the core repertoire, and we all grew up with the music of Bach, Beethoven, Rachmaninoff, Shostakovich, you name it, and we all learned to love it and understand it properly. But mirroring the society in our programming for me means that we include a lot of female composers, composers of color, and minorities. And I think it's wonderful to be able to represent a very varied literature, especially for the piano, because let's face it, no one will ever be able to play every single piece written for the piano. But it's an incredible, fulfilling journey, and I feel it attracts a lot of the younger generation in the concert hall, and it gives a voice to those that have been neglected or forgotten or completely deleted from history for one reason or another.
Amazing. We're going to come back to that younger generation, the console thing in a second, but just to sort of to dive into the why behind this. Why was this something you were fascinated in doing when sort of from when you started playing the piano? What sort of then drove you to discover more works by people that we may not have come across before?
Well, to be very honest, I only discovered female composers when I started studying at the RNCM, at the Royal Northern College of Music in Manchester, and it was quite quite a journey. And I collaborated with Emily Howard, who's a fantastic British composer, and she came to a lot of my concerts. And then she said, "I would like to write a piano concerto for you." And I thought, wow, well, first of all, that is the greatest privilege that you can get as a performer, to have a concerto written for you. And then we went through this beautiful collaboration, and we recorded the concerto called Mesmerism with the Royal Liverpool Philharmonic Orchestra. And the album got Album of the Year on NMC Records, and it was a beautiful way into discovering that, well, actually, there's half of the world out there that hasn't been discovered. And I think ever since, so this must have been, gosh, about 20 years ago, it's been a journey. And I think it's ever since the pandemic that I actually had a lot of time to really dig into the repertoire and see how many female composers are there? And I don't know if you know about the Done Foundation, but I think there's more than 5,000 women composers featured in this amazing website in the foundation, and it just shows that we can't say that there are no female composers out there. There are, but we just need to discover them and to respect them and give them the time, especially when rehearsing, um, to make justice to the music that they wrote. So I think the pandemic for me was one of those moments, of course, no one had any concerts. So instead of being depressed and soaking, I thought it would be a lot better to um, talk to a lot of musicologists and journalists and go into archives and speak to lots of publishers as well. And I have to say, it hasn't been an easy road, but a very fascinating one. And I've discovered so much rep that probably I would have never had the chance to do so through all the touring and concerts that I do, like being away every single week somewhere else. And why I'm saying it's meaningful, it's because so many times I'm giving the world premiere or a national premiere of a specific piece in one place or another. And it's incredible the reaction that we get from orchestras, from conductors, from audiences. Um, I think audiences are a lot more adventurous and a lot more curious and risk taking than we think they are. And especially after the pandemic, they have this thirst of curiosity that they just want to hear a lot more different repertoire.
I hadn't realized that this journey was actually quite recent and short, and that you've achieved a lot in a short period of time. So, I guess for context, the primary output for you is concertos, you're a soloist. So, I'm guessing pre pandemic, your concerto season would be all male composers, or basically all male composers for the whole thing.
Yeah, all the core
Then,
repertoire, from Mozart, a lot of Mozart concertos to a lot of the uh, really big rap like Grieg, Tchaikovsky, Rachmaninoff, Shostakovich, Prokofiev, all of these. This was my normal season to season, whereas now it's completely different.
definitely. So now it's about 50% female composers, is that right? Or something along those lines. And that isn't just this year, you've also achieved that in the previous few seasons as well. So it's going from none prior to 2021 to what's uh, that sort of 50% ish within 2, 3 years.
Yeah, I think probably from 2019, I would say. This is when it really started. And I have to say, it's such a collaborative work that we do because, of course, if you program solo recitals, it's mainly up to you as the artist, as the pianist, to choose whatever solo repertoire you want to perform. But when it's about concertos, it starts very much with my amazing team that always puts in front of the promoters, they put a 50-50 list. So then, of course, it's up to the promoter, it's up to the conductor, then the orchestra. And if they actually manage to program a concerto by a woman composer, then it's working with the marketing department so that we can show the story, we can tell what's been happening and put that piece at the forefront so that the audiences don't feel so unfamiliar with it. Um, so this is where working together really, really helps. And of course, if the concert is broadcast or filmed, it helps so much more because then it gets the distribution and more and more people hear about it.
Definitely. So I'd love to unpack that a little bit because it's so almost easy to say, like, I'm going to do this as a thing, I'm going to start performing more works by other people, etc. But then, like you say, bringing people on board that journey is both at times a challenge, but also a varying process because there's different promoters and different orchestras in different places with different priorities and different people. How do you get people on board with something like this? And what have been some of the challenges that you've sort of come across along the way?
Well, there are many challenges, I'm not going to lie. It's a difficult process. I think, first of all, changing mentalities is one of the most difficult things that we can do. And it's about changing mentalities throughout the seasons, not just one. And it's not a ticking the box exercise that, well, we've had one female composer this season and that is it, or one piano concerto by a female composer. So the challenges we find, I presume, from the orchestra side is how are they going to sell that concert? So they would pair it with a really, really famous symphony in the second half, or I as I said, I collaborate a lot with the marketing departments, and it's about creating a lot of social media content. And we're not talking here about, hi, I'm Alex Dariescu and I'm going to perform Nadia Boulanger. It- that's the easy way. And I think that content, like everyone would just scroll past that. It's very much about storytelling, about playing bits from the concerto, telling the life story of that particular composer, trying to get the audience to become familiar, to understand what era that composer was from, and create links. So one of the most successful ways I've managed to program female composers was to pair it with another male composer that people would know. So we've had some really beautiful collabs, I would call them, or juxtaposing two different concertos, Florence Price and Rachmaninoff Rhapsody on the theme of Paganini. They go really well together. And they were both written in the same year, 1934. So you can tell the stories that, well, one of them is known all over the world and the other one has been played for just a few times. And most likely will be a premiere in that specific country. Um, Germain Taillefer with Ravel's piano concerto in G has worked beautifully, and that keeps being programmed because Taillefer was Ravel's student, and she wrote this beautiful ballad for piano and orchestra, which is only about 15 minutes. So it works perfectly as a opener. And the beginning is exactly the same notes as the Ravel G major piano concerto. So there's all of these links that you can put together, and they work really beautifully. Another one I would say, and I won't bore you with all the the pairings that I do, would be Clara Schumann, who wrote her concerto age 16, coupled with Georgi Enescu concerto, who wrote it age 16 as well. So we're exploring the prodigy theme. So there are many different ways of selling a program like that. And when people see that there's another familiar name, they think, well, that's an anchor, and that's an easier way to, well, I will pay for a ticket and go to that concert. And I honestly have never ever had an experience where audiences members were like, well, I didn't really like that female composer, because they are there without judging. Uh, so for me, programming female composers, it's not about their competition with the male ones. No, it's we give them equal time, equal rehearsal time. That's absolutely the most important, so that um, the orchestra, the conductor, and myself, we feel really comfortable. Sadly, there's a lot of mistakes in so many of these scores because we're either playing from manuscripts or because the pieces have not been played very much. None of the corrections had been made, so they did go to the publisher. So there's a lot of challenges that we find, but it's really thinking about the bigger picture and investing as much in a Clara Schumann concerto as you would do in a Robert Schumann concerto as well.
Fascinating. I think with many organizations, there's a temptation to think that audiences aren't going to be interested in a work that they don't know, whether that is new music or works by composers they don't necessarily know already, and that you need to anchor them with major things and have Mozart, Bach, Beethoven, etc. But it sounds like the reception from audiences, like you said about younger audiences really liking these performances, kind of counteracts that. What's been sort of the reception from audiences, in particular younger ones, and is this potentially the key solution for connecting with younger audiences?
Well, maybe it's one of them. Um, I love it when there's teenage girls that come to the concerts and they say, gosh, I've never ever heard a female concerto before. I would love to play that. But the nicer thing is when we don't do when we don't distinguish between girls and boys, at the end of the day, it's our audience that gets so impressed by these pieces. And um, just this weekend, I was playing in Germany, and Germany is a lot more conservative than other territories. I'm not going to lie. Um, I find that the US, the UK, Scandinavia are a lot more open to programming female composers. But in the front two rows, there were about, I would say, 12, 14 teenage boys. And I think they were from the gymnasium, from the school that was quite close to the concert venue. Um, and they loved the Nadia Boulanger fantasy that I performed. I mean, I could see them. They were just sort of like really clapping loudly and woohoos, and they were completely mesmerized by the piece. So I think, especially with the younger generation, because they don't have the prejudice that, oh, well, it only has to be this music that we grew up with. They live in a completely different age than you and I, or some of the older generations. They and I look at my students at the Guildhall School of Music and Drama, they are already being educated and living and um living with this repertoire. There's no difference between, let's say, the Taillefer or a Kasparov or Doreen Carwidden. They already hear this repertoire being performed in concerts, and they don't feel so afraid because they feel, well, I can connect with that rep.
That's fascinating. Speaking of education, like, what is the reception from students? Is it that they come to you having an appetite for this, or is it that they're discovering it in other places? What's sort of the approach and their mindset when it comes into to their work as well?
Well, a lot of students want to play a lot more female composers. Actually, one of mine who is doing her artist diploma, she's doing her recital, which is, I think, 85 minutes, and it's only female composers. And there were some pieces that I have to say, I was very pleasantly surprised that she found. I didn't know of them. And she just said, well, I digged in the library and I found this and I found that. And I was thrilled. But it's not about forcing someone to do so. It's leading by example, I find, and a proper action. For example, I've had a beautiful collaboration with the Leeds International Piano Competition, and in their 60-year history, they had never had works by female composers. So we worked together and we initiated a new award, which was in my name for an outstanding performance of a work by a female composer. And because we gave the incentive to all of these youngsters, uh, that they were going to be, of course, there's a financial award, but also performing opportunities in different countries. Most of them had chosen to perform a piece by a female composer. So it shows that it can be done. Um, it wasn't 100% successful as I was hoping, because we managed to introduce the Clara Schumann Piano Concerto in the finals, and that was the only concerto um, in the finals that were going to be with the Royal Liverpool Philharmonic. Sadly, no one chose that. So that's why I'm saying it wasn't 100% success. But I think this is the start of something really exciting, really amazing. I think it was the first competition in Europe that embraced putting a concerto by a female composer in the final. And that says a lot. They are championing this repertoire and they are showing that we are bringing music in the 21st century and we shouldn't always live in the past.
That's such a good point. I think also being open about sort of some of the challenges that actually we have the best intentions and we do things and they don't necessarily make the instant impact. We may have to wait and repeat and iterate to make sure we get the change that is so important to bring.
Well, that's the
Um,
thing. I think every good thing comes for those who wait. Don't they say that? But patience is a great thing, but it's not just talking about change, especially in classical music. It's about taking action and doing little steps that they're going to change things, but very slowly. We can't achieve change overnight, and I am absolutely certain of that, and I believe in it. But I think the more partners, the more people you get on the journey, and this is why I was talking about the collaborative way of working. It's about persuading people and opening their ears and their eyes to something that is worth listening. And when we shine a light on these composers, then just I think the whole society becomes richer.
Totally. Well, you previously touched on the modern world and the way things change, and it's important to change with them. How do you see the role as a soloist has changed in the modern world? And you've already mentioned about how you've been involved in the marketing to make sure that people are helping to adopt these new types of programming, something that you wouldn't normally necessarily think soloists would be involved with historically. So, what has the role of the soloist changed like, and what are your thoughts of the future of it?
I think it's a lot more demanding. I'm not gonna lie. I mean, comparing it to even the repertoire that pianists would have 30 years ago, they would have sort of 4 or 5 programs throughout the season and that would be it. And nowadays, it's nowhere near like that. Of course, you can say no to a lot of things, but um, the the demand, because we travel so quickly from one continent to another, every orchestra has a different way of programming. They have a completely different theme. And talking from my own experience for this season, especially, it's probably been one of the most challenging ones, great ones as well. But I started the season with 7 different concertos in 6 concerts. And that was just the first 6 weeks of my season. So, yes, it is very demanding. The role of the soloist in general, I think, has changed because working with the marketing department and having a social media presence is a lot more important nowadays. It depends on every artist, and you cannot generalize. Some artists choose not to be on socials at all. Um, some others, like myself, embrace it because I want to. Uh, I I like to communicate with my audiences, and it's very interesting because I was talking to a journalist recently, and it's about the online audience and it's about the audience in the concert hall. And sometimes they overlap, but you have to admit that sometimes that social media audience might never come to a concert hall. If they do, that is a huge success. That's fantastic. But some of them just like the little snippets. Um, I think creating content is hugely demanding on any artist because so many times I would get asked from the marketing departments to make all the content, but of course I have to make it ahead of the week that I'm going to be with them. So in that, at least I like to do my research. I've got this beautiful series called Off the Record, which is done really, really well. And it's about uh, putting some fun facts and cheeky ones and really off the record. They're not necessarily he was born in or she was born in that particular year. It's nothing academic. It's quite fun and an easy way in 1 minute to talk about a composer's life. And it's done really well because it's very human, it's humorous, it's very energetic, it's very short. Let's face it, social media, it's all about the very short attention span, which doesn't really help with classical music. But all of that takes so much time because it's about the research, it's about filming it, putting all the lights and everything, editing it, and then posting it. And of course, every platform has a different ratio that you have to post it in, and it takes a really long time. So unless you love it and you embrace it, you simply can't do it because it's a lot of time that you spend on that. So it's part of the world. I never want to call this a job because I don't feel it is. It's a lifestyle. You know, waking up every morning with a huge desire to practice, to get better, to travel, to live out of a suitcase. It's pretty tough on anyone, and there's not many downtimes. But it's exciting, and I love that pace of life. But again, it's really different for everyone.
Definitely, and I think as you mentioned, the social media, it's a fascinating element you said about people who may consume it but may not necessarily come to the concert hall. I don't think that's necessarily different to recording audiences, and some people may listen to CDs or historically LPs, and that was what they wanted, and they wouldn't necessarily then convert into audiences. So I guess that's been there in the past. But aside from marketing, you're also potentially a new sort of modern musician anyway. So you're actively involved in those curatory conversations when you are at orchestras asking about what's the program going forwards in a way that may not necessarily have happened in the past, or speaking to donors, You're also the founder and creator of the Nutcracker and I, and so many more entrepreneurial things. How do you see sort of entrepreneurship now being part of being a soloist or a musician in the modern world as well?
I find it's an integral part of our lives. Um, Especially, uh, I I don't know. I think people my generation, I love the entrepreneurship spirit. I I've embraced it completely. And when I first came up with the idea for the Nutcracker and I, I'm not gonna lie, not many people believed in it because they thought, what do you mean to combine live music with ballet and animation? Wh- We didn't use AI whatsoever, like everything was hand drawn, and we had more than 36,000 drawings, and it was sort of the Disney style animation. But to create and to curate something like this, it literally took years of my life. I'm not gonna beat about the bush because the fundraising was a really difficult task. And I think nowadays this is where the creative entrepreneurship spirit comes from. Sadly, as an artist, if you want to create something, be it an album or a project or a collaboration or anything, you need a lot of financial support. So I wasn't taught any of that in school or in college, so I had to sort of dig deep into my own intuition. And I had a brilliant story very much at the beginning of my fundraising campaign. Um, that I went into a beautiful house with a gorgeous piano, and I arranged this whole thing with the director of animation there, and the ballerina and myself. And I was playing and I was talking about all this project. And at the end, I had to stand in front of all of these people. There were about 100 of them, quite wealthy donors. And I had to ask for money. And I couldn't. Literally, I choked. And I said, okay, let's all have a little glass of bubbly at the end. And that was it. And I thought, well, as an entertaining evening, this was fabulous. But as a fundraising effort, this was completely useless because I raised 0 pence. And it was very interesting because being an artist, you are there and you receive the applause and you work really hard and you play and you communicate with your public. But when it's about asking for money, that's a really difficult thing to do. And I never knew that I would find it so difficult. So then it turned out that the one-to-one approach was a lot more suitable for myself. And this is how I managed to raise all the money. And when we had the world premiere, it was just the biggest dream come true. And we put on the performance online and it got sold out within 3 hours. And we put a second performance and it was sold out until the next morning with not very much marketing. I mean, we didn't have any TV exposure or anything like that. And there were lots of people thinking, the naysayers, which of course they spur you on. And whenever you hear someone saying, well, you won't be able to raise that much money or do this, of course, it gives you a little bit more of an impulse and energy. Well, actually, yes, no, we will be able to do this. And after the world premiere, we had a humongous 2-month world tour, which was incredible. People just needed to see it happening, to see that I could actually take it to the finish line. And it's been such a successful recital format because at the end of the day it's a piano recital, but I'm showing the audience what I'm imagining using very cool technology and live dance. And the most fulfilling thing has been to get 3 or even 4 generations from the same family at the same piano recital, which I tell you and everyone will tell you it never happens. And it's about inspiring the younger generation, to dare to dream, especially in today's world. I think kids really need role models and they need that impulse to have a dream, to work really hard and to never give up because the easiest thing you can do in life is give up. But to work really hard and to fulfill your dream is just extraordinary. And it's those people that manage to get over any challenge or any closed door in your face. Literally, it's happened so many times. Those are the ones that actually lead a very happy life. And I consider myself being very blessed with this sort of positive attitude, which I feel we really need. But nowadays, there's so many more creative entrepreneurship courses. Lots of colleges offer it. And It's about making a business plan. It's about being able to pitch like Dragon's Den style, pitch in front of donors, knowing how to do an elevator pitch. In 30 seconds, you just need to pitch your idea and get people to fall in love with your vision. It's a hard thing to do, and unless you have practice or have someone to mentor you, it can be quite difficult. But there's so many resources and so many amazing people out there that I think the younger generation just needs to go and find them and always ask for advice. And I think that's the best secret.
Fantastic. Well, speaking of pitching, coming up with concepts and projects, etc., you are someone who's been recording lots of albums and CDs, and this year you've released your 10th album. Um, I'm fascinated someone can break that down in the same process, because albums is something that we all sort of want to have, but we don't really speak about how to have or any of the process behind it. So, what do you see as making a good album, and how do you go from idea to reality?
I think what makes a really good album is to be yourself, to be very authentic, and to have a really good story, have a really good reason why you're recording that specific album. So for me, number 10 was probably my most personal one. I wanted it to feel like a celebration. It's also 30 years since my concerto debut. And I wanted to celebrate it in a very, very unique and beautiful way. So, um, collaborating with the Academy of St. Martin in the Fields was literally a dream come true. And I wanted to record the piece that I did my concerto debut with, the Mozart Rondo in D major. And we recorded that and some chamber music and a lot of solo pieces. Some of the pieces that I grew up with and I played in my very first piano recitals, and a lot of encores that I do now, and they are pieces and works that really define me as a mature artist. The most beautiful thing was that I discovered a lot of new repertoire. So we have 4 world premieres on this album and 8 female composers. Some people might have never heard of Leocadia Kashperova, Stravinsky's teacher. And I've included Missy Mazzoli and Amy Beach and Florence Price. But the beautiful thing was in the pandemic, I discovered Amy Schäfer Klein, a German composer married to an American composer. Most people would know more about her husband. Haha, what a surprise! Than about herself. And she wrote this beautiful piece called A Child's Dream. And this is where the title of the album came. I thought this is wonderful because my dream as a 9-year-old, when I stepped on that stage and I performed with an orchestra, it was I want to become a concert pianist. And I don't come from a family of musicians, so I never knew the implications of going for such a dream. But it just felt like I am here. I am living my dream. I've worked so hard, and here we are. Um, and I had such a clear idea about who I want to collaborate with, what the repertoire should be, and also the cover. The cover I find, because what do they say? You should never buy a book because of its cover. But let's face it, nowadays very few people hardly buy CDs. So it's all about streaming and it's about that tiny little thumbnail. How does it pop? How does it stand out in a sea of thumbnails? So I found inspiration from Banksy's The Girl with the Little Red Balloon. And I wanted to have a whole bunch of those. So it's very colorful. I am in a little red dress that symbolizes, the strength of the woman that I've become. But that big bunch of balloons symbolize the dreams and the hope and the positive energy that I'm hoping it inspires the younger generation, like me, a little child with a big dream, managed to make it, as it were. So I think storytelling is a really important thing in recording any album. Don't let anyone dictate what you want to record because I think um, your true voice will come out in the recording. So if I've been incredibly blessed that every single album is so different and I recorded some works that I would have probably never been able to had I been forced into some sort of you have to record this rep. So being true to yourself is one of the most important pieces of advice that I received as a young student. And I will always carry that with me because it's your voice, it's your business card. One of my mentors, Sir Andrew Schiff, he always said, people will not see your picture at the beginning. They see the program, they see the poster on any um, wall, and that program is your business card. And that should be the most important. That's what represents you in that particular moment of time. And if you are true to yourself and you program, whether for an album or for a concert, if you program the repertoire that is yours and you have something to say with it, then I think you're halfway there or more than that.
Incredible. I think that's such a really good story that we tend to sort of miss. But yeah, storytelling is such a key part, and also the impact of these first touching points. And we sometimes assume that people will have a deeper connection than they may do, and they may flip to understanding through our biographies or different elements. And that sense of initial connection probably ties in back to how you are promoting and marketing concerts as well,
Well,
which I think is really powerful.
that's something else also. How so you've got your album, but how do you market it? Because if you're just gonna say, "Here's my new album, please go and listen to it on so and so streaming platform," it's never gonna work. So with this one, I've tried a different strategy that's actually done beautifully. Instead of just announcing I've got a new album, I got a beautiful friend, I can call her, a little girl who's only 9, a little Fleur, and she is an aspiring young pianist. And I came up with this little concept that we're on a bench and I have a balloon and I ask her, "What's your dream?" And she says, "My dream is to become a concert pianist." And I give her the balloon and we both walk together hand in hand towards the Royal Albert Hall, which is everyone's dream to perform at. And that announcement of the album did so, so well. I was so surprised and, of course, really happy because it was something new. And we have a lot to learn from the pop industry and everything, with little video clips. And this is what inspired me for one of the world premiere pieces by a Romanian composer who wrote this piece called Romanian Dance or Gypsy Dance. Um, to get a lot of guys and girls dressed in bear costumes. And I managed to persuade the Palace of Culture in my hometown to allow us to film in this gorgeous palace. And we had 40 bears, as it were, dancing around the piano. And it was all about traditions and my roots and the folk elements from this music. And this is a tradition that you would have around Christmas. And of course, it was around Christmas when we filmed it. And that video did so, so well. And it just shows that it's not only the playing, but it's what I'm imagining while I'm playing. And this is where the storytelling comes in. If you manage to open another little door for your audience, online or otherwise, it's fascinating and it brings you closer to that audience as well. And then they will always come back to your page and go, "Oh, what else has she created?"
Such good advice. It's fascinating. Well, we're just about running out of time, so I want to throw a couple of rapid fire questions at you to end on. So, the first being, if you could change one thing in the industry, what would it be and why?
I would have to say programming. I would program more to reflect the society we live in. I would give a lot more time to the voices that have been neglected and forgotten and completely deleted from history, in order to have a fairer society. And I would encourage all marketing departments to embrace collaborating with their artists and to really create beautiful content together, because I think every artist is unique and they have a different story to tell.
Fantastic. And finally, what gives you hope for the future of classical music?
Well, Sir Clive Gillinson, the CEO of Carnegie Hall, said there's no better time than the present to be in this industry, and I really believe so. There's a lot of um, financial problems going around everywhere in every country. But I think the power of music is so, so strong. And the collaborations that happen between everyone, the artists and organizations and radio stations and everyone is so tight at the moment that I think the future of classical music is really, really bright. I have a lot of hope for the future, and I think the way that artists think at the moment, they're so creative, they're so curious. They're I think one of the most beautiful things as an artist is to always create, and that no one will ever take that away from us. It's just about being brave and using our voice in a positive way, and always try to create good change.
I'd like to thank Alexandra Dariescu for joining me, and thank you for listening. Before I go, this is a final reminder that we are heading to Budapest for Classical Next 2026 from the 8th to the 11th of April. It's that 1 week where the whole industry actually gets together in one place, and I would love for you to join us. Registration is still open, and you can get a spot over at classicalnext.com. If you have any thoughts on today's episode, or if there's someone you think I should be talking to for the show, you can find Classical Next on LinkedIn, Facebook, and Instagram, or just get in touch through the website. And if you found the show useful, please do subscribe and share it with your colleagues. I'm David Taylor, and I'll see you next time.